Hey there, my name is Vaughn, and this is the Vaughncast Show. This is a podcast that focuses on mental health, breaking societal stigmas, harm reduction, addiction, and recovery. If you like what you hear, subscribe and leave a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Also, follow the podcast Instagram at The Vaughncast Show, where I post video content from the show. All right, let's get into today's episode. To the Vaughncast Show, I'm your host, Vaughn. I'm back with Jule. How are you today?
I'm good.
You're good. Good. I'm okay. Feeling a little under the weather, but hopefully it's just in my head. So this is part 2 of the imposter syndrome episode. Last episode, we covered pretty much like what imposter syndrome is, its origins, why do we think imposter syndrome occurs, common signs, and some of the imposter syndrome types. We really got in depth with it and didn't realize that, we probably need a part 2. So we're continuing from there. So where we left off, I believe it was perfectionism, and we talked pretty in depth about it. And I think where we should resume is how do we manage perfectionism if you struggle with it?
Okay. So there's this part with perfectionism that I don't know if I'm sorry, my memory isn't like so hot these days. Did we talk about the difference between pursuit of perfectionism or perfection versus the pursuit of excellence already?
Yes, we did. We actually brought it up, and I think that's where we kind of ended off.
Okay. So one of the biggest things that I think is really hard for people to understand is that when you don't hit perfection, when you don't hit that full 100%, you have to stop making it mean something about you. And that is incredibly hard for a lot of people to do, especially around the realm of making mistakes. Shoot, I was going to ask you if it would be possible for me to do like a whiteboard or like a screen share, because I think this would be helpful for people. Oh. So I am showing you like a drawing that I share with some of my clients sometimes in my sessions. And if we're talking about perfectionism, one of the key problems with perfectionism is that we're unable to handle the concept of making mistakes, of doing anything less than perfection or 100%, whatever it is you want to call it. And that's because we have this thing in our mind called expectations, which you'll see at the top. Okay. So life happens, right? Life happens. And then at a certain point, we reach a fork in the road where things diverge. There's what we want to happen, which is this part up top that I've labeled expectations. But then there's actually what actually happens, right? Which is the reality. And this is where perfectionism comes into play. And I explain this because what is happening here is this gap you see between these two diverging branches is comparison. So we are constantly comparing the reality of our lives versus what we wanted to happen, the things that did not happen, our expectations. And it is in this space that we find the word mistake. Now, I was just talking to a client today, and he has an incredibly hard time speaking up with people. He has a hard time, how do I say it? He has a hard time pushing back on what he believes to be right because he is so afraid of making a mistake. And the problem is when you think about the word mistake, it inherently comes with this feeling of wrong. Like you're wrong, you effed up, you messed up. But if you think about it, and you look at like this diagram of life and reality, right? Like this is all you have, this black line, this is all that actually exists. Everything else, like this gray dotted line with the expectations, that doesn't exist. And so for me, the idea or the concept of a mistake only lives in this space of comparison. You only think something is a mistake because you are comparing what you have with what you think you should have had. And that's the feeling of mistake that comes about. So then the question I gave him was, what if there's no such thing as a mistake? And so here's the sentence that I like to share with some people. And I'll write it here. So I want you to write down this sentence if you're listening to this episode. I cannot make a mistake. There are two ways to interpret this sentence. So when you look at the sentence, how do you interpret it?
I feel when I read that and I interpret in my head, I feel a little lighter. Like I feel I'm worrying less and I'm less critical about my decisions.
So what does that mean? When you read the sentence, what's the meaning you got in your head that helps you feel lighter?
It means that it's okay. Like it's reality. Like my decisions were not a mistake. It's just part of life.
Yes. So I'm just writing down some of the things you said, right? It's okay. My decisions are not a mistake, part of life. And this is the part that I tell you 95% of people never get here. So 95% of the people, when I show them the sentence, they read, I cannot make a mistake, as in, I always have to be perfect. And this is the problem, right? Like you're literally not allowed to make a mistake. Whereas the second interpretation, which is how I view things, how I view life, is no such thing as a mistake. Okay, so there's no such thing as a mistake. And a lot of people are going to fight me on this. You know, you're going to have people who listen to this episode and they're going to be like, she's talking crazy. But for everybody who has that reaction, I'm just going to say, just take even 60 seconds and just allow yourself to feel that. What if there really is no such thing as a mistake? And so if I scroll back up here to this diagram, right? We get messed up because we are constantly comparing our lives to what we have versus what we think we should have. And the problem is that what we think we should have doesn't exist. And this is, again, the space that mistakes live in. So it's like, what are you even comparing to? And that's the viewpoint I have on mistakes and therefore perfectionism. So perfectionism like really hones in, like it's like tunnel visioned on this idea of I messed up, I didn't get perfect. Even 99% feels like a fail. And so then they'll ruminate, they'll obsess over mistakes or missed goals. This is what makes them a micromanager. And so if you think about it, it's a very strange behavior because instead of looking at the 99% you do have, you're focused on the 1% you don't have. And that's what I find really strange about perfectionism. It's like, why would you want to live your life that way? So again, the difference between the pursuit of perfection versus the pursuit of excellence. The pursuit of excellence is saying that you feel that what you have in the moment is good enough while allowing yourself the room to strive for better. And then there's this one saying that I remember seeing a while back is that sometimes half-assing it is okay. And a lot of people are going to hate this idea too. But just remember that in our pursuit of perfection, it actually keeps us from starting a lot of the time. And that's also like a major problem. So the funny quote that I remember hearing is that, remember, half-ass is better than no ass because you never even got started.
Right. You know, thank you for sharing that. What I also got from that, resonating it back to me being an addict, is that, okay, so I work in 12-step program and it has statistically a low percentage like passing or people like will relapse. what we learn in the program is that it's okay, right? Like a lot of times, if you relapse, you think like I fucked up. Like, yeah, you might have messed up, right? But like you keep going. You can dwell on the fact that you relapsed X amount of days. I have so many days and I relapsed. I can't, I'm done. Like that, I can see that being debilitating. Or you can say relapse is part of my story. From there, I learned something, and therefore, maybe it's not a mistake. It's just it's part of it. They say that relapse is a part of recovery. I don't think anyone gets it right for the first time. For me, before I worked this program, I must have relapsed once a week for like a couple of years because I would always tell myself, "All right, this week, like this is me coming down from the drugs, feeling shitty. All right, I'm done. No more drugs. I'm gonna stop." Or at least let me not do it for 30 days. A few days later, I'm back at it again. But looking back now, it's like that was it. It's okay. That's part of it. I'm here now in a better place. So I think that's I don't know. That's how I see it from an addict's perspective. That it happens. Sometimes it happens. A lot of times it's preventable, but regardless, it's okay.
Yeah, and if you don't mind me sharing my screen again, I'll show you like a demonstration of what this looks like because
Yeah,
it's
sure.
I find this like super relevant here. Okay. So what happens is that when you're on a journey, okay, you'll have the perfectionist mindset where they'll think that they're going to start off and in their head, they're imagining this kind of trajectory. Okay. But then what actually happens is you have a relapse or you have something like you fall back or you have a setback, just like what you said. And so the difference here is that a perfectionist will feel the need to start over from ground zero. So then they'll start again, right? And then maybe another setback happens. So then they're constantly starting over again and again. And as you can see, you don't get very far because you're constantly resetting versus the person who then may have a setback, but then chooses to keep going, right? And they keep going. And in fact, if you see like what's really interesting about somebody who is not so obsessed with perfectionism is instead of starting back over from like ground zero when they have a setback, is they choose to just keep going from where they left off at this point, right? So even if they have a setback, they still keep choosing to keep going. And I think that's the most important part is you'll have somebody who start, stops, like on this left side. And then you'll have somebody who actually understands that it's more important to keep going. It's not so much about where you came from, but the direction that you're headed in. And that's the part that's really something you want to like take in and pay attention to.
Yeah, I agree. And it's difficult sometimes. Like, I've definitely had a lot of setbacks, even staying clean. But I tell myself, like, I'm comparing to expectations. I do it a lot, actually. I expected a lot this year. And, like, it's going a lot slower than I expected. And I think that's why I'm upset. But then I got to tell myself that this is life. There's things I can work on. And through it, I'm kind of learning. I don't know how everybody else learns, but for me, sometimes I got to learn the hard way. I think that's just how I am for the most part. And I'm kind of learning more about myself, making mistakes and fumbling and everything or that kind of thing. But looking at it, it's like, okay. But with that, though, I learn more about myself and kind of learning why I do the things that I'm doing. And I'm reaching out, getting help, still seeing two therapists, and I go to like meetings weekly. So looking back in hindsight, it's like, yeah, I expected to do this, but this is how it is. And I think when I accept that, when I don't compare, I feel a lot better about myself. It's not easy, but when I let go of that expectation and just, this is what it is, I feel more at peace.
No doubt. I feel like this is a message that everybody needs to hear. And when you can have that level of I don't know what you want to call it, like being able to forgive yourself and move on, right? Because what keeps so many people trapped is they don't move on. They just stay stuck.
Yeah. Um, moving on, it's difficult depending what it is, but I think just that acceptance or surrender, whatever you call it, it I don't know, it makes situation it's still not going to be great, but you're able to move on from it, and it's not like you're going to move on instantly. It'll be over time for me at least. Like when I'm having a bad day, I messed up or whatever. I realistically I can't tell myself, "Oh, it's all good. I'll just move on." To sometimes it takes me like a day or two, but I just know a lot of times when I go to sleep that night and I wake up the next day, I feel a lot better, just ready to start over or just keep going where I left off.
I like that because you're acknowledging how you felt. You're not like rushing through it, but at the end of the day, like you're basically saying, you know, you have a choice and you're making the choice that you know is best for you.
Right, right. So I think we can go on to the next one. I believe it was the expert as one of the um, imposter syndrome types.
Yeah. So we have the expert type, and I feel like this particular type is super popular with people of color, especially Asians, especially women. And this is the person who often feels like they can't do something new without learning everything there is to know about the thing. So this person feels like they can never have enough knowledge or skills. Like this is 100% me. Something I've had to work on really hard for most of my life. Didn't even know it was a thing because that's how I was brought up. You know, my parents raised me, like literally told me that if I had my education, then everything else would fall into place. Uh, the place I'm at today, I totally don't believe that. I don't agree with that. But it kind of like laid down the roots for the foundation, or like it laid down the foundation for imposter syndrome here. So this is a person who will constantly go for more certifications or more degrees. They will not apply to a job unless they meet every single bullet point. And you'll see like a divergence here. It'll be more women who do this than men. And the running joke is that a woman will meet 19 out of 20 bullet points on a job description and won't apply, saying that she's not qualified. Whereas a man will meet like one bullet point and be like, I'm totally qualified and will apply. So it's kind of a funny, but like not funny, not like haha funny reality. And then the expert type is also the person who generally has a hard time asking questions in front of a group because they don't want to look weak or dumb. They don't want to feel like there's any chance that someone could perceive them as not good at their job or not knowing what they're doing.
So I can relate to the part of not asking questions. You know, in my early age when I was high school, a lot of times I wouldn't ask questions in front of a class, in front of the class, especially when the instructor or teacher said, anyone have questions? I think because I felt I'd be like mocked if I asked something very simple or I didn't get it. And a lot of times I suffered because of that when it came to exams because I didn't ask the question. I didn't ask, oh, how do you do this? How do you do that? Or I don't get it. I don't know. I feel like in high school or elementary school or middle school, kids can be a little more cruel. I feel like in college settings, it wouldn't be as bad. But I remember definitely being one of those where I wouldn't ask questions and I suffered from it, from like not doing well in my tests. So definitely start asking questions like after school, after class, or eventually I had the courage to like raise my hand and ask, hey, how do you do this? But there's definitely that fear of ridicule, which is very real sometimes. But at the end of the day, it's like, I'm pretty sure that a lot of people in that classroom have the same question, but they're scared to ask as well. So it's not just you.
100%. And you know, you're actually reminding me of one of my clients. I just had a session on this like a couple of weeks ago. So generally, I coach adults who are, let's say, like 35-ish and older. But I do have one client who's a lot younger. He's 17. And his mom put him into coaching with me. And he was literally in the same kind of situation you're describing, where he wasn't doing so well in his math class. And here's the thing, though, he already had a hard time asking for help because of all the things that you just said. But he made himself ask for help. He went to the math teacher and he was like, hey, you know, Mr. So-and-so, can you help me with this? Can you show me this? And you know what the teacher said? I was just like, dude, this teacher. The teacher said, we already went over this. And I was like, oh my God, like, you need to be slapped. Your job is to teach. And if somebody didn't understand what you taught, then your job is not done. Like, how dare you say that to somebody? So I was just like, I didn't say anything to the client because, you know, that's not really my place. But I was just like, okay, so this is where I think a lot of people would have a very hard time because what that teacher said leans into more of the same problem you already have, right? Like this is already a moment of vulnerability for a person in this situation. You're asking for help. You already don't feel comfortable. You're already afraid of looking dumb or somehow, you know, less than. And then for a teacher to say that, it's like, dude, that's not cool. So then the question is like, if you end up in that situation, what do you do?
It's funny. I was put in that same exact situation by a math teacher in college. I think it was business calculus, and I'm not the best at math. Anybody who's listened to my podcast, I've probably spoken about math, and you know, I'm not the best at it. I remember I couldn't do I couldn't do a calculation method that required that like to do like pretty much there was some sort of like formula. I didn't get how to like do a certain formula that you need to do it. And he said, "Oh, you should have learned that already. Like you should learn that in like class something something." In my head, I'm like, "What the fuck, man? Fuck you, bro." I didn't say that out loud, but I go to tutors. I went to tutors, and I mean, like it didn't really faze me because it was all adults. But like as a kid, I probably feel really like upset about it. Um, but I don't know if that happened. I would have probably been upset. Um, go ask somewhere else for help. But like as a 17-year-old, I don't know how I'd feel. I don't have like, I won't have as much like emotional tolerance and like self-esteem to like kind of get out from this. I don't know. I don't know how he did, but it's a kind of a, I don't know. It's not the best feeling.
No, of course not. And he ended up doing the same thing you did. He went and found like another source, someone who would actually help him. And, you know, I think that's fine. But with where that kid is at, you know, one day he's going to go out into the real world. He's going to probably have a job working for somebody. And I said, what are you going to do when you end up in a situation where you have no other choices? There is no one else to ask for help. So your only option is the person who maybe was kind of a dick to you, right? Like, what are you going to do then? So there's this potential, like in the future of you might have to kind of learn to speak up for yourself. And it's not that I'm telling anybody like you should accuse these people or be like, F you, but it's just the ability to express what you're feeling and just saying something like, hey man, like this is already hard for me. And it doesn't help when you say we've already gone over this or you should already know this, because I don't. It's like, please don't make me feel worse about this.
100%. Where I work, I've been at my job for like 2.5 years, almost going on 3. I'm nice, but I'm especially nice and extra patient with people that just came in because I know what it was like the first day, my first few weeks, you know, doing something, and I just do my best to really like be patient. It's not that they're like they don't get it, it's just they've never really done this type of stuff before, or they don't know a faster way. So hey, this is how I would do it, or oh, I messed up or something. I'm like, no, it's okay, it's all good. Don't even worry about it. Just because I know what it's like. Just in general, like I'm not the most. Takes me a while to learn certain concepts. Sometimes I might have to ask the directions 2 or 3 times. But what's nice at where I work is no one ever makes me feel dumb. It's like sometimes that's how it is where you don't understand something. Sometimes you're a visual learner. Sometimes you're not you're more like auditory. Like for me personally, when I read books, not doesn't do I don't get as much I don't retain as much as if it's an audiobook. For some reason I can remember like small stories and things from like podcasts, but when I read stuff I don't always remember it. So everyone has a different way of learning.
I agree. So I think even, or especially with the person who might experience the expert type of imposter syndrome. And just as a reminder, when I say these 5 types of imposter syndrome, like don't think of it as like a category that you're putting yourself into, like you're not putting yourself into a box. It's more that when you experience imposter syndrome, it tends to manifest in one of these ways or in 2 of these ways more than the other ways. So this is really designed for you to maybe reflect and then recognize certain patterns, common themes, common ways you've reacted to certain challenges in your life. And once you've identified them, you realize like, oh, so the next time, like I'll show you an example, or I'll talk you through an example, is because the expert imposter syndrome type has always been my thing, and I just didn't know that that was it. Whenever I enter a situation where I don't feel like I know everything, that tends to throw me for a loop. So like even if I meet a client or I meet a person, like I was talking to my friend yesterday and I was like, I know this is going to make me sound like an asshole, but I'm almost intimidated by one of my clients because he's so freaking smart. Like he is so smart. And I told her I'm not used to meeting people where I feel that way about them. As in, I think he might be smarter than me. And that might sound ridiculous because obviously there's like millions of people smarter than me. I have no doubt. But it's a combination of I'm just not used to feeling that way about people. And so every time I get into a situation, whether it's about a person or like back in the day, I think you know this story. 3 years ago, people used to invite me on their podcast all the time. And I was terrible about it. I ignored dozens of requests to come on podcasts because of imposter syndrome. And in my head, I was playing this story that they were going to ask me a question that I wouldn't know how to answer. And so in my head, it's like the entire story like broke down. I was just like, I don't know what I'm going to do if they ask me something I can't answer. They're going to find out. They're going to think that they should never have asked me to come on the podcast. They're going to regret asking me. And so there's usually some kind of narrative playing in your head about what you think is going to happen. And, just a reminder, I don't know if I said this in part 1, but like everything you do or don't do is because of how you think you will feel. So in this scenario, because I'm thinking they're going to regret asking me to come on this podcast, like even with you, sometimes I feel that way with you. I'm like, he's going to feel that way. And then I'm already like pre-feeling the shame that I'm going to experience, that I think I'll experience. I'm already experiencing that, just thinking about it. And I don't like that feeling. So then I'm going to do everything I can to not have that feeling in real life. And this is what I find a lot of people do. So it kind of circles back to like, once you identify these patterns, what are you going to do? And so today, like who I am today is like, whenever I start to feel those same feelings coming up, I talk to somebody. So, I was talking to my friend yesterday and I was like, gosh, I think I'm intimidated by this guy because he's so brilliant. And so then that helps me catch myself in the moment. I'm like, okay, stop being weird. Just be yourself because that's all you can be. And to be anything but yourself is only going to make things worse. So in a lot of ways, what we don't understand is that in trying to avoid what we think is, something scary, it actually makes that scary thing come true faster because we are acting in ways that are inauthentic to ourselves.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. I can relate definitely sometimes when I meet certain people, I feel intimidated sometimes. It can be a good thing. I don't know. I'm gonna cut that out. But yeah, I feel like that's relatable. When I go on people's podcasts, I don't go too many, but I get like a little nervous. you know. Um, I didn't realize that, like, well, thank you for coming to my podcast 2 years ago, because I know I've had you on the podcast before, and thank you for coming in. And it's never like, sometimes for me, I feel bad like asking certain questions that they may not know the answer to. There's been one episode where like I asked something and the person didn't know, and she asked me, "Oh, can you like not publish that episode?" I felt like I didn't know what I was talking about, and I didn't publish it. We did another one, but I told her it's not a big deal. It's okay. I can edit it out, but you know, I totally understand. So that's kind of why I like to sometimes send questions out. I don't like sidelining people by accident, but no, definitely when people ask me certain questions, I can't respond. I feel a little, I don't know, like I kind of blank out and I feel kind of silly sometimes, but it's just how it is.
It is how it is. And if you think about how that person's response was, I was like, whoa, that is a little bit extreme. Not extreme like I'm judging her, but like, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, right? Is the saying. And I was like, just because she couldn't answer this one question, that you could have edited out like that small section and you could have had the rest of the episode and nobody would ever know the difference. This is the thing that I think we all forget, is that we're so caught up in our own stories that we forget that people are not mind readers. Like they have no idea like what's going on inside of our heads. And so when they hear the finished episode, like if you had put out that episode, with just that small piece edited out, no one would ever have known. And that's what kills me.
Yeah. But like, as you said though, in the previous one, there's no mistakes. We recorded a second one and it overall turned out a lot better. So yeah, but I totally get it though. I could have edited it out, but like, yeah, it was just, I got it though. I understand where she's coming from. Um, Sometimes I get intimidated by you in a sense, not in a bad way, but it's like, especially for this episode, you're like, you speak a lot about imposter syndrome. And I'm kind of like, what can I bring to the table kind of thing? But I don't know. I just like stop thinking about expectations to just have a conversation.
I have an answer for that, not just to you, but to everybody else out there. Like every time you enter a situation where you're questioning, what do I bring to the table? What value can I bring? And I was like, your own experience. Hello. Like you have stories, you have things that you can relate to. And like, that's all this is, right? It's like, I think we also forget that when someone is sharing their knowledge, like that's just a part of their experience. And maybe they've happened to frame it in the context of that situation or that conversation as almost like, I'm here to teach you or I'm here to give you value. But we have to remember they're just sharing a part of their experience. And there's no rule or requirement that says you must also share the same kind of experience. No such thing.
Got it. Got it. Yeah. Sidetrack. When like I meet women I'm attracted to, like sometimes a lot of times I'm intimidated, but in a good way. I don't know what it is, but maybe like how they carry themselves or something, and I'm like, oh shit, I'm intimidated, but it's kind of in a good way. I don't know. That was kind of random.
Well, I think what you're getting at is that confidence can be perceived as intimidating, but it can also be sexy, right? Like it's attractive. And when you talk to somebody who knows themselves, right? Like they know the space that they're taking up and they own it, they own themselves and they're here for it. It's like we find that very attractive.
Yeah. Okay. I know exactly which situation it was. It was with a friend. I think when I met, we first had a crush. I had a crush on her. She had a crush on me, and we started dating for like a week. But we realized we were better as friends. But this was a long time ago, and she had like she was younger. She was younger than me. She had a son, but she was able to support her son. She had a job, and she was able to like play these roles of being a mom, being a worker, and hanging out. And I thought that was like really attractive. I was like, wow, this is like really cool. I'm kind of like inspired. I think that's what really drew me to her. And we had a really good friendship for a few years. So yeah.
That's so cool. Like I'm glad you were able to see and recognize that what she was doing was not easy, right? Because so many people I know would see the same situation and would totally dismiss it.
Yeah, it was cool. It was cool. Yeah, she was really cool.
Well, there's this one piece. I don't know if you wanted to do it for every piece on like how to manage that imposter syndrome type. So if you wanted to do that, we could do it. We haven't done
Yeah,
that for the expert type yet.
yeah. Let's do that.
Okay. Well, in the same vein of like recognizing other people's gifts, like we need to do the same for ourselves. And for the expert type, if you experience this, I think the reframe that's like really important here is that you don't need to know everything yourself. And this is something I think I taught myself at a very early age, and yet I still forget the lesson. So you don't need to know everything yourself. You just need to know where to go find the information.
Totally. That makes a lot of sense. I related to that because I felt like I had to know everything. That's why I didn't like asking for help in lots of aspects of my life, and actually turned out to be detrimental, to be pride. But I felt like because I was a certain age, I was growing and need help, or I saw help as a weakness, asking for help. But it was actually quite the opposite.
Yeah, it, I think a lot of people have the same experience. I think sometimes I still run into having a hard time asking for help because I'm afraid of how it's going to make me look. So many of us have this.
Yeah, but a lot of times it makes you look like, in reality, it looks like that. Like it looks like it's strength because you admit, "Hey, I can't do this on my own. I actually need help," and there's a weight lifted from doing that. Um, I don't. I started seeing two therapists just because one therapist wasn't enough in a sense that I was not able to see her on a weekly basis. So instead of just kind of seeing her once every few weeks, I decided, hey, let me see another therapist. At least this way I have more FaceTime, or like more FaceTime, just seeing somebody for help as opposed to just once every few weeks can be like once every couple weeks.
Hey, good for you, man. So I think because we're talking so much about asking for help, like maybe we should do the next type as the soloist. What do you think?
I'm down. It actually works.
Okay, so the soloist imposter syndrome type or the manifestation is you think you should be able to do everything on your own, and achievements only count if you did them by yourself. Asking for help makes you feel silly or incompetent or weak, incapable. You fill in the blank here. So the audience, or Vaughn, like any of us just here, I find that the soloist can go hand in hand with almost all of the other imposter syndrome types because this one is like really tricky. And it's something that was taught to me by my dad, like at such an early age. He was like, you can never depend on anybody else. You can never ask for help from anybody. You have to do everything on your own. And I didn't realize like how deeply embedded that was for me.
Yeah, there. I mean, there's a certain like flex of being independent to a degree, but I think in a sense, back to we're all kind of connected. Like I don't like relying on other people too much, but I like to ask for help when I need it. And I think there's a balance. But I totally agree. We can't do anything. We can't do everything by ourselves. I think there's nothing wrong with asking for help. And like you said in the previous episode, I agree with when you said there's no one that's self-made. You would have to ask help one way or another. Even like going on YouTube, I think that's a form of help because you can't just learn something from scratch. I mean, you can, but there's a lot of times where people helped you out here and there. And like you said before, when you say you're self-made, you kind of brush off what they've helped you out with.
Yeah. And, for people who learn stuff on YouTube, I'm like, you wouldn't learn those things if YouTube didn't exist, if those creators didn't put their information or share their knowledge online, right? Like, you did not come up with every single thing you know today by yourself. Like, it's impossible. And I don't know, like, asking for help, like, I find this super frustrating. And I tend to see this more with men than women, not like by a crazy amount, but a little bit more with men. And this is where, like, I'll sometimes say, how frustrating it is, because I don't think these people understand the impact they have on everyone else around them. Because of their refusal to ask for help early on, it makes things get so bad to like a critical, like, catastrophe level, that by the time they like really, really need help, because now it's like pedal to the metal, like they have like a huge fire to put out. And I'm like, your ass couldn't have asked me for help like 3 weeks ago when it would have been easy. Now you've literally made it that much harder for me to like help you. And it's not that I don't want to help you, but like, think about it. Like, you're making it harder for people to help you. And now there's no choice, because they know that your ass is on the line. So they got to help you, but they're not going to be happy of how you positioned this whole thing. So that's why I say somebody who won't ask for help is really inefficient. This is a person who is blind to the resources around them. They refuse to use the resources, and they think that somehow this is like a badge of honor. I'm like, it's not really.
Yeah, I will say there's this thing about this is my previous belief was like, I'm a grown man. I don't need help kind of thing. I'm a man. I can handle it on my own. Right. I think these are things that were kind of ingrained, maybe our generation. I don't know about the next gen, the more younger generations, the current ones, but there's definitely that like machoism kind of like do it on your own. You're a man, handle it on your own. I mean, some things you got to handle on your own, but a lot of things you can get help with. And a lot of times, like I see in the, in the 12 step rooms is a lot of people didn't ask for help a lot earlier on or like didn't want to. And this is where it kind of led them to a degree, you know? So there's definitely that's true. But yeah, asking for help. I don't know. When you said that story, I related to so many things in my life where I could have asked for help much sooner, but my pride wouldn't let me. I always kind of told myself, I got this. Okay, I got this. I'm good. I don't need help. I don't need help. And then I've definitely put people in positions where they had to help me because, like you said, their ass was on the line. Like my life was on the line, like my job was on the line, or just situations were on the line. And when they helped me out, I realized that, if I would have just asked for help that other time, it wouldn't be this bad. And now here we are. It's a, it's a, it's a, it's fucked. Like I'm fucked, and I could have gone for help a lot sooner, but because I told myself I don't need help, I got this. I was in denial, you know, uh, and it just got so much worse. So when you said that, I had like a flashback of all the things I've done, and yeah, it's definitely true.
Yeah. Well, I think we all go through that learning experience, Well, hopefully we learn at some point to not keep doing that. Or somebody yells at us, right? Like, I remember it was my brother. He would wait too long and then he would ask me for help. And I'd be like, dude, it's not that I don't want to help you, but now it's become incredibly stressful for me to help you. And I don't appreciate that, right? Like, let me help you when it's easier to help you. I don't know where he falls on this, but I feel like he hasn't actually changed. I think his answer to me telling him that was, I'm not going to ask you for help again if this is how you're going to respond. So I'm like, well, that's on you, dude.
Right. So with that, I guess, yeah, just ask for help. I think the solution for that would be, it's okay to ask for help. It could save you down the line, it can save your relationships, money, a lot of things. So it's okay to ask for help, especially for guys. I think this generation is more accepting about it, but a lot of people in our generation, it might be a little more difficult, but there's nothing wrong asking for help. It doesn't make you weak, and it doesn't, like, I don't know, people won't see you in a different light. If anything, they'll see that you're vulnerable, and that's always good, and that it's okay. And a lot of times that macho facade, it's just a facade. So a lot of times we all need help, but we're just too, I don't know, we're too prideful to ask.
Yeah. Now, I think it's a little bit tricky here because when we say ask for help, we often don't know how to ask for help. So this can mean you asking for extra time to finish something like a project or an errand. It can mean identifying very early on who are the people in your life that you might want to sort of set aside and just give them a heads up like, hey, I might need you to help me with something. And then the number one thing that I'll say is everyone routinely waits too long to ask for help. They always underestimate like when they need the help by, right? They wait too long. When I say they underestimate. So whenever you think you need to ask for help, you just move that date up by a week or even 2 weeks. And that's probably when you need to really ask for help, right? So then the other ways of asking for help is to maybe think about what kind of information might you need and where or who can you go get that from? Asking people to help you with actual tasks. Maybe you need help around getting like a physical space of some kind, or maybe you actually need money. So it's a lot of types of ways. And so I think with asking for help, you have to ask yourself, like, what's the hardest part for me for asking for help? And how can I make sure that I address that the next time it comes up so it doesn't cause an insane level of stress for me and for the people around me?
Yeah. I think for me, again, it's still a pride thing. I still have a hard time asking for help, depending who it is. Like, I guess, yeah, certain people I have a hard time asking for help from, but certain people I don't mind. So that's why I go to. But for me, it's definitely like a pride thing, but it's something I'm working on.
Well, that's all we can ask, right? And I think I'll like leave this one last idea. I was like, the smartest people are the ones who know how to ask for help. The smart person is the one who knows they can't handle something on their own. So they're going to go and find the person who can help them with it. Because it's like, otherwise, what's the alternative? You're going to crash and burn? No, thank you. I don't want that.
Yeah. Yeah. I've definitely done that before. It's not pretty. I think we kind of glamorize it, right? Just the whole, I can do it on my own. You kind of envision yourself at the finish line, like, yeah, I did it on my own. I didn't need anybody's help. Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you kind of thing. But then that's an expectation. The reality is you crash and burn and you're in a lot worse place than you were if you were to ask for help.
Let's do the superhuman.
Okay.
So the superhuman, I find this especially rampant in corporate culture. So people who work corporate jobs, people who work in restaurants, and sometimes just business owners across the board. This is the person who thinks they should be able to do all the things in every area of their life and work. They're constantly overextended because they never say no. They feel like they can never turn down work because they're so busy trying to prove themselves. They're never satisfied because they're always thinking they can do more. And because of all of this, they're the ones who are usually burned out because they never stop working, because they've turned it into like a thing of, this is how I prove my worth. This is how I prove I deserve to be here. So they're always working, and then there's no limit. I'm like, when are you going to draw the line? Right? So it can be hard. So how you recognize this person in your life, or maybe you are the person who's the superhuman. This is the person who's usually staying the latest at work on a regular basis. When everyone else has left, they can be the person who's always volunteering to take on more work. They're often the person who not only has a full-time job, but is also the PTA president, is also the person at church, is also this, that, so many positions of responsibility. And they're still trying to be the super mom or the super dad at home and take their kids to all the soccer games and all this and all that. And I'm like, when do you have time for yourself? It's crazy.
I think that superhuman thing, I think we glorify it in our society, right? I think that's what a lot of people strive to be. That's what people strive for. Personally, for me, I've definitely taken a lot more, accepted to do more things than I should have out of a fear of inadequacy. Like, I got to prove myself. I got to do this. I got to do that to prove to everybody that I can hang or something. So when you said that, that's super relatable, but I feel like that's a thing that, like, it's a badge of honor to be, I'm Superman or Superwoman. I can do this and do that. Maybe you can even like use that as like, oh, I'm doing this, this, and this. What are you doing? Kind of flex.
For sure. And I think in the American culture, right? American meaning the United States, there's a certain level of glorifying the hustle culture, which I think is really unfortunate. And the problem here is that so the superhuman tends to go hand in hand with the perfectionist type. You'll generally see them together. The thing that makes it the hardest for people to stop both of them is that because when you're doing it, it tends to give you results, but only for a period of time, like a short period of time. So the really strange thing that happens with my clients, whether it's perfectionism or with the superhuman type, it's the same issue, is that even when they've passed beyond their peak performance time for in either of those traits, they won't let go. And it's because both of those are like what I call self-reinforcing. So when you're doing it and you're doing it well, it gives you results. So then that tells your brain, it tells your mind that this works. And therefore it makes it that much harder to let go of. And so, I have a friend right now. I would say she's operating at like 20% of her normal capacity, her speed, her intelligence, all of this. And yet she will not take a break. She is so afraid to let go. And I was like, but look at what this is costing you. You're making so many mistakes. You're spending all this time working around the clock. And it's been 2 months and you haven't moved. Like your work, your career has not progressed in the past 2 months. So what did this get you? Nothing. And yet people have an incredibly hard time of letting go of either of those type of traits. So this is me sharing this message with the listeners, just in case you hear this. It's a call to wake up and look at the reality of your life, because you will have the inner voice that keeps telling you that this is the right thing to do. But if you look at the evidence in your life, like when's the last time you took a break for yourself? If you're really honest with yourself, how many mistakes have happened in the last 6 months or the last 3 months? How many things have fallen through the cracks? How does your family feel about you? So why do you keep doing the same thing is really the question. And it's because in your head, there's a lie. The story playing in your head keeps telling you that this is what works. And so you have to keep doing it. And if you just try hard enough, it's going to work. And I'm like, no.
Yeah. And I mean, there's definitely something to be said about hard work, but there is definitely like a line of I put in all I can to just keep going. I don't know. I feel like for me, it's like a form of punishment. Like, you messed up last time. I'm going to go that much harder this time around. That's how I remember I would do things. Like, I would do it because of that. But again, like you said, we glorify it. It's like our culture. This is the norm to do that. But I think more and more we're noticing burnout. I mean, admittedly, when I was younger, in my 20s, I could do this. I could stay up all night. I could write whatever paper and party, and I would go to school or work the next day. Cool. I felt so cool. Yeah, I can do this. I was able to do it for X amount of semesters, but man, as you get older, you can't do that. I think that's where it's at, where your body can't recover as fast as it did, and it can have a lot of consequences. Like, for example, for me, I used to party a shit ton back when I was younger. Everybody knows that. But, if I did that now, I don't know if I could do that. It'd be really dangerous just because I'm a lot older. I'm 36, turning 37, or I can't party like that anymore. I'm realizing now I have a finite amount of energy. When I was younger, maybe everybody felt like this, but in my 20s, I felt invincible. I'm like, fuck it. Who's going to stop me kind of shit? I don't give a fuck. I'll do whatever I want, whenever I want. I can do it. I can hang. And to a degree, I was able to because I was like younger. I can recover. But now I'm realizing, man, I have a finite amount of energy. I can't burn out like that anymore. Maybe once or twice I can like do a bunch of work, like more than I can, but I can't abuse that like I did. And I think when I realized, accepted that, hey, I have a finite amount of energy, I'm cool with like, I don't care what people say about me. I do whatever work I do, it's cool. But I don't have a need to like keep going extra for. I think also too, well, a lot of it is people do it to like get recognition or to get badge of honor. Like they know they're kind of burning themselves at the ground, maybe, but like for some reason they feel like they need that external validation.
I think there's a lot in what you just said, like all true. So the first thing I think I remember you saying is punishment, right? Absolutely true. At least with some of my clients, they've actually expressed this to me, where they feel like they don't deserve to take a break. So then they punish themselves with more work. And I'm like, well, look at what that's getting you. You're so exhausted all the time. The quality of your work is not good. Your family is not happy with you. You're not happy with you. So why would you keep doing this? But then it goes into the next territory of they believe that this is what they have to keep doing. And so where this is what I call updating your context, right? So literally like you realize that maybe the stuff you used to do in your 20s, you just can't do that anymore. You have updated your context. You understand that what used to fly back then just doesn't fly now because you know your limits. And the problem with these people, like my clients or even some of the friends I talk to, is they refuse to acknowledge their limits. They don't update their context. And unfortunately, what they do is they turn these exceptions, like the exceptional circumstances, into the everyday. And I was like, if you think about your car, right, or any machine that you use, would you drive your car at 100 miles per hour for 10 hours a day, every single day, and expect that car to keep running just great after like a month? No. So why would you expect the same of you?
I think with that, there's a lot of stuff out there on social media which I get, it's commendable, but a lot of people just keep saying, keep pushing, like there's no limits. I get it, but I think there's a line you have to really figure out for yourself what that limit is. Like, I don't know. I'm all about optimism and you can do it, but there's a certain line where it's like, you gotta chill, you gotta rest. And it's still sometimes like a taboo word in like hustle culture. You can't rest and, you're losing out on opportunities and stuff. Look like, imagine if you work this hard for like X amount of years, you'll be good, in that X amount of years financially, your family will be all good and everything. But what about yourself? You know, and I think this is where sometimes, not every time, this is where you might rely on substances like Adderall or like uppers. And at first it might work, but then you might be dependent on it and you feel like, well, I gotta get the work done. So I need this to do it. I'm not addicted. I'm just doing this to get the work done. And just this cycle.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking from experience, I definitely remember I would drink and then like do drugs, uppers, and then write a paper and feel so validated. Like, yeah, I can do this. I'm gonna keep doing this. Then, it doesn't, you get burnt out. But yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. I think when I was younger, I used to wish that I could have taken Adderall or taken any of the stuff because I was like, the idea that there's a drug that can make you focus and make you like want to stay up and do things, I thought that was amazing. And movies like Limitless, it doesn't help either.
Yeah, I feel like we did hella coke because of Limitless. Just shouts out Limitless. We felt like we were unstoppable. We felt like we can do everything. Is there, again, looking back, there's become kind of delusional, right? I think there's a difference from like having goals and like realistic stuff to being like fucking delusional, especially if you haven't slept for like 3 days. I mean, shit, man. I thought of some wild stuff. I thought like, I can do this, this, and that, but it was definitely under the influence.
Yeah. So, shall we share like a couple of ideas on how to maybe get out of this like hustle?
Yeah. How do we do it?
I mean, it depends on like what's really driving you, right? So you're pointing out a lot of people, stuff you see on social media, stuff you see online. There are people like Gary Vaynerchuk who tell you like you're not trying hard enough. I think that's one of the lies you need to get out of your head. You're not trying hard enough. There are the people like I mentioned earlier who feel like or who are stuck in this cycle because they are punishing themselves. And whereas you had the grace, right? You had the capacity to understand that you had to give yourself some space and some room. You understood that you're no longer 22. Most people don't think like this. Like it might sound ridiculous, but they don't think like this. They don't have these realizations. They just keep pushing the limits. So again, it's like if you make the exception become your everyday, then what's left, right? Like you're using up all your energy all the time. So there is some story lurking in there. And if you keep peeling back the layers, what's usually like lurking at the heart of that is some inability to forgive themselves for past mistakes and therefore feeling like they don't deserve to take a break. They don't deserve to pull back and to retreat. So they keep pushing harder and harder.
Yeah. And what you said about the Gary Vee thing, definitely. Like, I remember I was so about that. I mean, I still am, but now that I'm older, I take what he says with a grain of salt. Before I was like, this guy, like, is the shit. He knows everything. I'm sure he knows a lot, but like, I kind of put it in context. Like, yo, I know my limits. I don't care what anybody says. I know my limits. I don't want to push it. I don't want to risk it.
Yeah. And to understand that knowing your limits is not a bad thing. So I think psychologically, we don't like the idea of limits. And I'm like, limits are there for your own safety. Imagine driving along the side of a cliff that has no guardrails. Like, you have limits for a reason. And then you have to think about what are the consequences if you choose to go beyond your limits consistently, right? Not just as once in a while, but all the time. And if you're not understanding the impact it has on you, then maybe take a look at the impact you going beyond your limits has on the people all around you, your family, your spouse, your children. People are not thinking about this. Or if they do, they're very quick to dismiss this. And so there's an element to this of knowing your boundaries, respecting boundaries. So boundaries, there's this thing that I think about boundaries that nobody ever talks about. See, boundaries are a two-way street. So the people who are unable to set boundaries with others are often the ones who also transgress other people's boundaries because it is a two-way street. Because they don't understand boundaries, they're more likely to piss someone else off. And so these are the people who, because they've gone beyond their limits and they start drawing upon other people's time, energy. They're drawing from other people's wells. And it's like, maybe you do that every once in a while and people are okay. But after a certain point, if it becomes all the time, you know the truth. People are not okay with this. And yet they turn a blind eye. And I'm like, there's something wrong there. It's like, why do you ignore this? And so then the most common, the common justification I'll hear from people, clients, is work. For some reason, work is the altar that they will sacrifice everything for. And I'm like, well, that's your choice. But it is not your choice to sacrifice others on your altar of work, right? Like, that's not okay. You can make the choice for you, but it's not okay for you to also sacrifice all the people around you too.
Yeah. I also, too, it could be a form of addiction. I'm pretty sure there's people who identify as workaholics where they work to maybe escape family life or personal life. They just figure, let me just do a bunch of work. I mean, it sounds good, right? I'm doing a bunch of work, which is good in a sense, but maybe you might be running away from something. You know, if you're in the office most of the time, again, I can't really speak on this. I don't have a family, but I don't know. Like, there's definitely been times where I live with certain people that I didn't want to be around them a lot, and I chose to do other things. And I don't know, work could be like, oh yeah, let me stay overtime, so I don't see them as much, go home and leave before they kind of wake up, kind of thing.
Yeah, I see that. You're right. And like almost anything can be turned into like an avoidance mechanism, like the thing that you're using to not address other areas of your life. So there's that going on for sure. And then there's the other piece where we use work as a method of proving our own self-worth. And I think I see that a lot more commonly with people is they have not yet figured out how to determine their own self-worth and stand in that. They haven't like figured this part out of who they are, what do they think, what is it about them that makes them special, to even question whether they are special. And I'm like, every single person is special. But these are the people I find have the hardest time because they're using work to fill that bucket. And unfortunately, when work or business doesn't go well, then what happens? Your bucket ain't getting filled. So then they just try harder. They squeeze harder. And I'm like, this is not the path.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I guess with that, just give yourself a break, right? I mean, I don't know. It's tough, especially if you're like kind of deep into it, and it's really difficult because it's ingrained in our culture, right? So a lot of it's just I don't know. It's a personal journey to like distance yourself from that culture, which sounds so like it sounds right, but to what extent? What are you sacrificing? I think once you figure that out, maybe you can step away from it a little bit.
Yep. So shall we move on to the natural genius?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, this is the last imposter syndrome type. So the natural genius is kind of in the title, right? Like just like how all the other descriptors were. This is the person who thinks they should excel naturally or easily. They expect to get things right on the first try, which you might think sounds like silly, but there are so many people. I cannot tell you how many clients I work with who actually expect this. They judge their level of competence by how quickly and easily they learn or do anything. And then there's this weird expectation that they would go from beginner straight to expert. There's like no in between.
I can relate to a degree. I found myself doing this. I sometimes, I don't know if I covered this last time, but I dread writing songs because in my head, I have this thing where like I'll put a beat on and I'll write a song like that same day when it's kind of a process. And I get discouraged because I don't do it right away. I don't do it in that day or I have a writer's block when in reality, like it takes time. Sometimes it comes right away. It's happened before where I listened to a beat and within the same day or next couple of days, I had the song ready. It was all good. But I'm learning that, I don't know, it takes a while sometimes and it's frustrating that I don't finish it. I have to be realistic that it does take time. And I think I want that instant reward. That's how my brain works. I want to get it done right away. So what I started doing now is like I listen to like beats on my way to work, and that kind of like jogs my mind because I can't do much when I'm running on my bike. So let me just think like creatively while I'm on my bike about being safe at the same time. So that's helping a lot. But there's definitely that I want to get done right the first time. And if I don't, I'm spending too much time on it when I'm realizing that it does take time.
I think the part you just said is the trap a lot of people fall into. So there's this expectation. It's like, this is taking a lot of time. I'm spending too much time is the next leap in the thinking. Whoops, sorry. So they're thinking, you might want to edit that bit out, but they go from thinking just like you, this is taking a lot of time. And then the next leap in the thinking is, this is taking too much time. And that's the part that a lot of people fall into. This is the trap. So the trick is to not make it mean something extra, right? This is taking time. It's okay to acknowledge that perhaps this is taking more time than you expected, but to not make that mean something about you where you end up feeling less than. That's always the problem here. So if we talk about reframing this mindset of expecting to just go from beginner to expert or to just always be good at everything, that it should be easy, is to understand that the effort you put in always counts more than your natural ability. You know, you hear stories about people like Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant, all these athletes or these superstars, these people who will tell you straight off the bat, you know, they actually weren't that good when they started out, but they put in like thousands of hours of practicing, like just thousands of hours just practicing one skill. And so at the end of the day, the level of effort you put in will always trump ability, always. And then to realize that real success always takes time, just like what you were describing with trying to write a song. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I like how you said that you shouldn't make it deeper than it actually is if you don't get it done right the first time. I remember one time I literally did 99 takes to record something that's like a verse. They didn't even end up using it. Like this person, like I sent it to this person, he never even used it. I'm like, fuck, but I was so frustrated that it took me like literally 99 times. And for some reason, I think in my head, maybe because I see social media clips of people just like recording stuff, and it seems like they just do it in one take. Some people do. So when I start comparing, I'm like, man, I'm not like that. How come I'm not like that? And I get frustrated. And I think as a creative, you got to accept that sometimes you have good days and sometimes you have bad days. Like it feels really good when everything flows and goes your way, where everything kind of just lines up and you get it done right away. And I think for me, I chase that high where I'm a person where I want to do something. I want to pursue an activity that takes the least amount of resistance, that gives me the most amount of reward, i.e. dopamine, in the shortest amount of time, whatever it is. That's just how I am. And when it doesn't go that way, it's difficult for me to accept. But I got to realize that some days are better than others when you're creating or just in general. And you shouldn't make it like a lot bigger than it is. Cause in my head, I'm thinking, man, like maybe I'm not cut out for this, or I'm not doing enough. Start spiraling and having negative thoughts about who I am when I'm realizing it's just one of those days.
I think you're amazing because you've come upon these realizations on your own. You know, it's not like you've worked with a coach or a therapist for that long. Like you've had a therapist, but it hasn't been that long. And you've managed to sort of reel yourself in. I'm not saying you were perfect at doing this all the time, but you've managed to realize these things. And I think what makes part of the journey, like the life of a creative, kind of hell is because there's like these highs and lows, right? And I would say that's actually true of life in general. But like the trick is to learn to surf, right? You learn to surf the waves. When it's at a high, you take advantage of that. When it's at a low, you learn to retreat a little bit and take care of yourself. And that's just how it is.
Thank you. I think a lot of it is having conversations like this on podcasts or with people in general, because I think people really deal with this very frequently, especially creatives that sometimes just don't have a good day. And I think over time I'm becoming more like forgiving of myself and accepting how things are. It definitely didn't happen overnight, but I'd say it definitely happened over time in the past few years where I'm just like slowing down, especially just, I don't know, I think I'm getting a little older and I'm kind of realizing, hey, like I said before, I have my limits. I'm not going to let social media algorithms dictate my value. And that took a while for me to sink in, for it to sink in. And once I did that, I'm like, okay, there really is no pressure. I'm putting myself like I think it's good to have like healthy like goals and like setting having a date where you want to do things. But like I'm realizing a lot of this stems from social media. I don't know how anybody else feels, but a lot of it is these goals, self-imposed goals I subconsciously created because I see stuff on social media. I see this person creating this, this, and this so quickly and so fast. And I'm like, man, I have to do it like that when everyone's process and circumstances are different.
So, not to be like a jackass here, but just to make sure that people understand, because I think I want, and I think you want the same thing, is for people to have accountability and responsibility over their own lives. It's not necessarily social media, but it's your reaction to social media, right? We see other people doing, and then we fall into the comparison. And so then we start spinning up stories in our mind that somehow it's easy for them and that they're doing like 100 things. And so therefore, like this is where the weird leap happens, is that we think we have to do the same things as them. So this is something that I get into with my friend a lot of the time, where she sometimes has a reaction to me doing certain things where I get, it's not always like a post goes viral, but sometimes when my posts do kind of get a lot of traction, she has this reaction of like, oh my God, like I'll never be able to do the same. And I'm like, but who says you should? Like that is the thing I find super strange. And yet we're all stuck, or most of us are stuck in that somewhere, that we don't even think to pause and question, what is it within us that makes us do that? What is it within us that makes us think that we're somehow supposed to keep up or do the same things? It's like, why do we even compare?
You're right. Let me rephrase that. Yeah, it's my reaction to social media. I think it's great. Like social media is cool, but definitely is my reaction. And I notice like on good days, I'm able to catch it, my reaction. And on bad days or not so good days, it's when I don't even realize that I'm comparing and having these like self-defeating thoughts. And I think that's when I'm realizing that, hey, if you're having a bad day, for me personally, limit your time on social media.
Yeah. And I personally like that. I'll have friends or clients who don't want to limit their time on social media. And to me, it's almost like an addiction at that point. If you know something is unhealthy for you and yet you keep choosing to do it as if you have no choice, you're starting to edge into the territory of addiction. And you're also basically saying you have no agency over your life, which I don't believe. So to me, the easy choice, the not easy, but easiest choice out of all the choices here is, until you know you're in a better place where you can address these things from a place of strength, there's nothing wrong with you choosing to limit your access or availability to certain types of things like social media, or maybe it's a toxic friend who always makes you feel like shit about yourself, right? It's like, why do we torture ourselves? It's so strange.
Yeah, and it's tough. I mean, I'm scared to look at my screen time. I probably will after this and see my screen time on social media, but a lot of times it's just for me to like pass the time. It's the first thing I do when I wake up, first thing I do when I sleep. I don't know. I think it's just how it is, and I got to be mindful of it. But yeah, it's just tough. Like, it's just so ingrained, but I think it's definitely a healthy balance if we can find it. And regarding to like, why do we keep doing this to ourselves? Again, I think it's like realizing you don't have a problem or that person not toxic. Oh, I don't have a problem. I'm gonna keep going on social media. It does not affect me, kind of thing. Or that other person, it could be because maybe, oh, they're gonna change, or maybe they're having a bad day.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. I think that is all the time we have. That was a really cool topic to talk about. Took 2 episodes, but it's pretty in depth. thank you for being on the episode or being on. I'm burning out, man. Thank you just for having this conversation. I got to learn more about imposter syndrome and the different types and how to look out for it.
Well, thank you, Vaughn, for having me back on as usual. Hopefully, I hope that your audience finds this useful as always. And thanks again for your grace and understanding.
My grace and understanding. I feel like a judge right now. Like I just need to like not guilty. Like, yeah, you're not guilty. Thank you, Your Honor, for grace and understanding. Yeah, no problem. But no, thank you. I like that. I didn't mean to make it a joke, but I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, cool. I'll end it there.